All right. Who's excited? I'm excited. This is going to be a great panel. I'm really so excited. We have a wonderful group to talk about what I think is one of the most important partnerships for all of our success for this next phase of creating this wonderfully orchestrated experience for our customers. And that is the partnership between the business and IT. So with that, please welcome our panelists, Krista and Mark, to the stage. Wonderful. So let me introduce our panelists, both from Okta. So Krista Anderson-Copperman is Chief Customer Officer at Okta. Her organization is called the Customer First Organization, which leads professional services, education, customer support, renewals, and customer success. So she's a very busy lady, and she brings 13 years of experience to Okta. Prior to joining Okta, she was a senior vice president in the Customers for Life organization at Salesforce.com. And fun musical related fact about Krista is she once worked a summer on a fishing boat in Alaska, which I'm going to tie this back to music, bear with me, which is not unlike Coachella in the volume of music that was blaring on the boat, but instead of dancing, she was wrestling 50-pound fish into packaging on that boat, which makes her job as CCO of Okta seem quite easy in comparison, I hear. And then we also have on our panel Mark Settle, who is the CIO of Okta. Mark is a 7-time CIO and has experience with multiple Fortune 500 organizations. He also serves on the advisory boards for several venture capital firms and is a 3-time honoree of the CIO 100 list, so very accomplished.
Thank you.
As if that weren't enough, he also is the author of a book, so I have to give a plug for that. It's called Truth from the Trenches, A Practical Guide to the Art of IT Management. So you can all look that up on your Amazon app now and order that up as a follow-up to the session.
Perfect.
Fun musical fact about Mark is he was a roadie for a high school rock and roll band, which was called the Null Set. For those science and math geeks out there, you'll appreciate the name of that band. All right, so with that, maybe before we get started, Krista, I thought it would be helpful for you to share with our audience what Okta does, for those who are not familiar.
Sure. So obviously I get asked this question all the time, and my answer is, oh, we manage identity. And some people will say, okay, yeah, I get that. But most are like, well, what does that mean? So the easiest way to break it down is really to think about when you guys go to work every day, you have a username and password that you use to get access to all the apps, data, information that you need in order to do your job. And Okta manages that. We make sure that you have access to what is appropriate for you in your work. The second piece that we do, or the second thing that we do, if you think about yourself as a customer, for example, you go grocery shopping and you may or may not be a coupon clipper, but if you are, the whole art of clipping coupons these days is more about the app in your hand and who you are to that company. So we manage those identities as well. So we manage you as an employee, and then we also manage you as a customer with organizations that you do business with.
Great. Good. So then, Krista, just to start things off, can you share how technology enables your team at Okta today?
Sure. I think there's a common misnomer that customer success is a completely people-driven organization. Now, I recognize that statement alone kind of flies in the face of what Nick talked about yesterday, but we are people first, right? Everything that we do is people first. But as an organization grows and you continue to move into larger and larger customers, you can't forget about the customers that you started with and where you came from as an organization. And the way that you do that is with technology. So technology really is at the basis of everything that we do in the customer first organization. If I go kind of team by team by team, each one of those organizations, from support all the way through to the renewals team, have a core, if not 2 or 3 core technologies supporting their work and what they do every day. And those technologies are often integrated with each other, as well as apps and things like Salesforce.com that the rest of the organization uses. So it's absolutely critical to everything that we do.
Yep. And how has that changed? How has your support and partnership with IT changed over time?
I think we're in an interesting age now where you have so many options. The technologies out there to serve our customers are numerous. You could spend, you walk through the halls here, but go to any conference, and there is an app for that is the truth for anything and everything. So it puts, as a business leader, you're in a unique position to have the exposure to all of those and have the ability to go out there and do the research. But then in order to make those things real and to make it real in the integrated way that I talked about with certainly the customer first organization at Okta, but the rest of the company, you have to partner with IT and you have to have their help to make these things real and make them happen.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Mark, how would you describe the role that your organization plays in support of Krista's org?
Right, so Krista used a great word, integration. I think a lot of these individual groups have tools of their own, and they get a lot of signals about how customers are using our technology and their degree of satisfaction or the frustrations that they're encountering. And if these response signals were all processed individually by small teams of people, they really wouldn't have very much strategic value. The real strategic value comes in integrating that information and delivering it in an efficient way, a timely way, and a digestible way to people that are in a position to act on it and do something. So I think a lot of organizations make the mistake of buying a lot of technology, and it helps maybe a small team do their jobs better, or it makes a small department do their jobs better, but it doesn't really have a strategic impact in the company. So the most value that IT can offer in partnering with Krista's organization is to make sure that we integrate those tools, and again, we kind of reduce the data into information that can inform action.
Yep. So Krista, Mark mentioned the value of IT and the value of what you're doing for the broader company as well. What would you describe as the benefits of a close partnership with IT?
Our partnership with IT looks a lot like an extension of our team. So we interact with the IT organization on a pretty regular basis, primarily through our key business leads, so the customer success manager, the support manager, but also our operations team. And it's not necessarily formal, right? It's not a formal check-in, but IT is often at my staff meeting or at extended staff. And what that partnership enables us to do is have a pretty seamless conversation around our challenges and the problems that we're trying to solve. And in the absence of that, I think what happens is you get into these kind of processes or these more formal discussions where the real context is lost. And I think that context building is what allows us to be more successful and really what it allows us to make those and create the right integration points.
Exactly, yep.
Yep, absolutely. Now, I know we have a couple more questions, but for those of you who have questions in the audience, if you want to pull up Slido and start entering them, we'll get there in just a few minutes here. So Mark, shifting gears a little bit, high growth, and Okta is a company that's experienced a lot of high growth, does present a challenge for CIOs, obviously, in many, many ways.
Yep.
How do you balance the needs of Krista's customer-first organization with the needs of the broader company at Okta?
Right, so we have a governance group that consists of our president, our COO, and our chief financial officer. They typically meet about every other month, and we review projects that are coming up. I think particularly in the customer-first area, there's probably been an investment of like one major technology project, a strategic investment on an annual basis. So I think, people think it's all a money game, and the decision makers are trying to figure out how much can we afford. There actually is a certain significant amount of change management that goes on in the way that groups operate and function, et cetera. And so, a lot of times I kid folks in my organization, and I'm not impugning this to you or your team, but some groups, they ask for like 6 different things, and if they were actually given the 6 different things that they want, there's no way they could actually absorb and do the work. They're kind of playing the odds and hoping that 1 or 2 will kind of get through the gauntlet at the end of the day. So I think the kind of interaction that Krista's talked about, on a more frequent basis, attending her strategy sessions and being involved in her staff meetings, it allows us to kind of look forward a little bit so that there's more of a defined roadmap and a prioritization of where do you want to place your bets and make your investments. And that kind of conversation really appeals to CFOs. There's nothing a CFO hates worse than having a whole series of one-off projects thrown up in front of him or her and kind of asking themselves the question, what did I get out of the last project that I went ahead and approved? But when you can actually talk about a 2 to 3 year roadmap, and you've decided to make an investment in the customer contact center, followed by an investment in a professional services organization, et cetera, those are the kind of strategies that really appeal to a CFO. So we've been able to achieve that with Krista's organization because of the ongoing contact and communication that we have.
Yeah, one observation, it makes me think, when I think of Mark's team, I don't think of technicians. And I know that you have all the technical expertise and know-how, but who we interact with and who we interface with, it's really the folks who understand the business. And I think that's pretty key to our partnership.
Yep.
We know that we don't know how the sausage is made, and we know that it's made well, but that interaction is pretty key. And that being the face of your organization, I think, is a key component to our success.
So one thing people may be aware of or not, so we were born in the cloud. The company was founded in 2009. And our founders, part of the mission was to run the company purely on SaaS applications. So we employ about 150 plus SaaS applications to run business on a regular basis. And so the rules of engagement in a SaaS-only company are quite different in the way that IT interacts with functional teams like Customer First. And Krista's team takes responsibility in many ways for configuring systems, administering access privileges to systems, loading data and whatnot. And the role that we play, which is important in many ways. We talked about integration, so moving data between not only the systems that would be the primary platforms for your teams, but in and out of other systems as well. And then more and more, a lot of the data management and security concerns. And people hate it when IT shows up on their doorstep with rules and regulations about security and data management. But here's the ultimate paradox. When those conversations take place, it's because you're actually doing something strategic that's important to the company. Mm-hmm. If you were off in the corner, kind of buying an application to help run the annual, meeting or something like that, but, that's no big deal. Like, we're not going to talk about that. But if you're actually starting to receive some interesting feedback signals about the quality of the sentiment that people have about upsell opportunities or promotion scores and how that's going to affect, our business in the future, then it becomes very strategic.
Right. So, Mark, I have to, on that topic, you hear sometimes that once you involve IT, you don't move fast enough. Things slow down, projects slow down. And of course, you also mentioned the importance of quality and all the security concerns that are top of mind for you.
Right.
Can you address, first of all, that perception that when you bring in IT, things slow down, maybe why that is, and any advice you can share for those in the room here on how to work most effectively and most quickly?
So when things really go tragically wrong is typically when any function has fallen in love with some kind of a tool and effectively says, we found it, we want it, go turn it on. And things are never quite as easy as that, in the real world. And so a lot of the considerations that come into play, they wouldn't take so much time and they wouldn't be such an obstacle if there had been these kind of conversations that you and I have talked about just now. If there's more of a premonition or a look ahead into the future. So I hate to, at the risk of repeating on myself, some of the road mapping that you do and the planning ahead can be critically important to avoid all that last minute chaos and hysteria that goes on that can really get in the way of good things happening. And to actually do a comprehensive job of planning some of the change management activities. Many things that go wrong with large projects, you can turn the tool on and you can load the data, but there are a lot of processes that start to break when the new technology is there. And people have a kind of a blind spot in many cases. They don't really think through how this is going to affect some of the well-established processes in an organization.
Right. Yep.
Good. Light on that one?
And a metaphor that occurred to me was, it's kind of like if you tried to paint your own house versus having a professional come in. Two very different results.
That's very true. That's very true.
Absolutely. Final question, then we can go to some from the audience. So as you look to the future, what do you see for your partnership at Okta? Krista, maybe you can open.
Sure. Mark and I have talked about this a little bit, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this over the last 2 days at this conference, but where technology is going, and particularly with AI, is really interesting for our function. And you think about, again, if I go function by function, from professional services, education, support, customer success managers, capture a lot of those. There's a lot of art involved in those functions and what people do, and that's why it is a people-driven function or a people-first function. But being able to capture at least some of that in a way that is meaningful and that can predict customer behaviors and what it is they're wanting to do or trying to do is really, really powerful. And I think if we can figure out what those technologies are and make them happen for our organization, we will be ahead of the game significantly in our customer interactions.
Yeah. I mean, I think a term that's been used historically is the customer journey that happens through an organization. And in the post-sales environment, there are just so many interactions that occur. And I would characterize the state of the art today. We have a number of course measures, right? So we go to the customer support desk and say how many tickets were filed and how long did it take us to resolve a ticket, et cetera. You know, what kind of feedback did we get from maybe a professional service engagement that took place? And there's so many ways to look into social media, the way people, the meetings they choose to attend, the adjectives that they use in their emails about the you know, interacting with your company that are going to become very fine-grained. I mean, very, very fine-grained. And the latency in that feedback is going to decrease as well. You're going to get a lot more depth and richness in the signals in much shorter periods of time. Then the real challenge will be, you know, do we have the processes in place to act on that and do something about it?
Yeah, the what's next.
Yeah, what's next, yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So I think we already addressed the speed question here. So one thing that I know has come up a lot that's on a slightly different topic, but the communication between the customer first team and IT and engineering, whether it's communication around the experience with the existing tools that have been implemented, or whether it's communication around product feedback. Any best practices to share? Mark, do you want to open?
Well, you might want to start on the product feedback, right?
Sure.
CSM side, yeah.
Sure. So, you know, I think every company has their established processes for how you interact with engineering on both an urgent escalation versus long-term roadmap. And if you don't, you should. So that's best practice number one. And this is more of a lessons learned, and it's kind of obvious, but make sure that your conversations are well vetted, right? It's again, to use probably a terrible metaphor, because I am terrible at them, but I love them, now I lost my train of thought. It was that good. It was that good. But make sure that it's well vetted. You know, make sure that you've really thought about it and that you've talked about it in your team and you've talked about it with the other functions, with the other customer-facing functions, including sales engineering, so that you can categorize this not only as an issue post-go live, but it very likely is a blocker in sales as well. So be pretty comprehensive about how you categorize and analyze those things and bring that business case to engineering in an established process, not ad hoc, and you'll likely have a lot more success.
That's good. I agree.
Yep.
Yep.
Good. Okay. So final words of wisdom that you want to share, and you know there are some questions we didn't address on this list around prioritizing for new applications, getting your needs top of mind, and partnering together to go implement and make a customer-first organization successful. Parting words of wisdom for the audience here. Mark, you want to go first?
So, sure, thanks. You know, when you work in IT, you get signals about what you're supposed to be working on, and in a lot of IT organizations, they're transmitted through multiple layers, organizations, you know, hierarchies, et cetera. And it's very difficult for IT to get feedback from like the real customer that's like out there, right? The thing, because, well, for obvious reasons, right? Because different organizations have their own priorities and agendas. So there's not, the signal to noise can be kind of low. And of course, people come in all the time and say, gee, if we only had this, it would just really be fantastic. But you have no way of viscerally knowing whether that's going to like keep the people in Coca-Cola happy or not. So the point of that is, I think the more you can involve some of the key people in IT in your organizations, like a business systems analyst or some of the key people in your applications team, and actually get them in front of a customer, I think it is a very transformative experience, that firsthand experience of actually watching what's not working. There are actually some IT organizations that rotate members of their staff on and off the service desk. So they're doing their normal work, and once every 6 months or 8 months, they'll take a 2-week assignment on the service desk to kind of hear like what the real problems are, not the ones we're told are the problems,
right,
but what really frustrate people day to day. And so, we can always do a better job of communicating and be involved in each other's meetings, et cetera, but I really think that eyeball-to-eyeball experience of talking to customers can really, really help get the attention of the IT organization and get it focused on your problems.
Yes. Krista, final words of wisdom.
Don't try to come up with metaphors on the spot. I think you categorized it well, right? It's the partnership, making sure that you're operating like you're extensions of each other's teams versus standalone orgs that occasionally check in with one another. I think that's really key to success with IT, and that's applicable across any relationship that you have in the organization as well as personally, quite frankly. So,
Thank you. Thank
Great.
you both so much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, keeping it moving. So this conference has been all about taking CS beyond CSM. We heard from CIOs. We heard from CEOs. We heard from sales leaders and services. We now want to hear from a marketing leader. So I'm really excited to introduce Ashwin Vedanathan from Gainsight, our Vice President Customer Success, to interview Jennifer